Okay. So yesterday was a late night for me, so I didn't do it. But again, like I said, I'm not gonna be catching up and doing two at a time. It's just too much. All right. So I just realized I was gonna start in chapter 12, and I forgot to move it. Oh well. Wait a minute. Where's chapter 12? There it is. That was chapter 12. All right. So let's see. Lord of the Sabbath. Matthew chapter 12. At that time, Jesus passed through the grain fields on the Sabbath. His disciples were hungry and began to pick and eat some heads of grain. But when the Pharisees saw it, they said to him, "Look, your disciples are doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath." So the Sabbath was supposed to be a day of rest. They were not supposed to do any work. And since the disciples are hungry and picking grain to eat it, they're saying that they're doing work. Verse 3, he said to them, "Haven't you read what David did when he and those who were with him were hungry? How he entered the house of God and they ate the sacred bread, which is not lawful for him or those with him to eat, but only for the priests? Or haven't you read in the law that on Sabbath days the priests in the temple violate the Sabbath and are innocent? But I tell you that something greater than the temple is here. If you had known what this means, 'I desire mercy and not sacrifice,' you would not have condemned the innocent. For the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath." And, again, he's kind of calling them out and saying, look, you guys are focused on the wrong things. So if you knew what this meant, "I desire mercy and not sacrifice," they're hungry and they're going to eat. And you're going to say, "Oh, well, you can't do it. You can't eat that way. That way you can't do it," And so, "I desire mercy and not sacrifice." And really what that means is do it the right way to begin with. Don't be ugly and need a sacrifice for it, because that's what happened. The sacrifice was for sins. And so if you were with sin, a sacrifice was demanded. But what he's saying is, "I desire mercy and not sacrifice." So treat other people well, right? That's really what's important here. So if you had known what that means, you would not have condemned the innocent. They were looking for a reason to be upset, right? That's really what it came down to. They were looking for a reason to be upset, and he's calling them out on that. Verse 9, moving on from there, he entered their synagogue. There he saw a man who had a paralyzed hand, and in order to accuse him, they asked him, "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath?" But he said to them, again, healing work. They're calling healing work, And they're trying to trap him because in their minds, of course, healing is work. So they think if they know how he feels about it at this point, they know that he's going to emphasize mercy. He just said it. And so they're trying to trap him. But he said to them, verse 11, "What man among you, if he had a sheep that fell into a pit on the Sabbath, wouldn't take hold of it and lift it out? A man is worth far more than a sheep. So is it lawful? It is lawful to do what is good on the Sabbath." Then he told the man, "Stretch out your hand." So he stretched it out, and it was restored, as good as the other. But the Pharisees went out and plotted against him, how they might destroy him. So why did they want to destroy him? Because he healed this guy on the Sabbath, right? And so basically he's saying, actually there's a couple of things that stand out here. Because one, he says, what person wouldn't rescue a sheep that was in a pit on the Sabbath? So that's the right thing to do. He's not saying it's wrong. He's saying it's the right thing to do, right? And then a man is worth far more than a sheep. So isn't it lawful? It is lawful to do what's good on the Sabbath. And then he heals him. He does exactly what they were trying to trap him with. And then they go out and plot how to destroy him. But here's the other thing. A man is worth far more than a sheep. We go back to Jesus and being controversial or not being controversial, right? And right here, there are a lot of people who don't think people are worth more than animals. But according to Jesus, a man is worth far more than a sheep. And it's not just the sheep, right? The sheep is not the point. People were the point. And so Jesus is emphasizing the special relationship of people with God. Verse 15. When Jesus became aware of this, that they were trying to destroy him, he withdrew from there. Huge crowds followed him, and he healed them all. He warned them not to make him known, so that what was spoken through the prophet Isaiah might be fulfilled. Here is my servant whom I have chosen, my beloved in whom my soul delights. I will put my spirit on him, and he will proclaim justice to the nations. He will not argue or shout, and no one will hear his voice in the streets. He will not break a bruised reed, and he will not put out a smoldering wick, until he has led justice to victory. The nations will put their hope in his name. So he warned them not to make him known, so that what was spoken might be fulfilled. And what was spoken was basically that he did his work quietly. He did his work among the people. He wasn't arguing, shouting, etc. But it's interesting because it says he will not do these things until he has led justice to victory. So this right here is saying at some point he's going to lead justice to victory. And what is justice but doing the right thing? You know, it comes from the word just. Justice is right. Something that's just is right. And so he's going to lead righteousness or justice to victory. Justice is going to win. And so the nations put their hope in his name. And it doesn't say it here, but the name Jesus means God saves. Verse 22. Then a demon-possessed man who was blind and unable to speak was brought to him. He healed him so that the man could both speak and see. So he was blind and unable to speak, and healing him, because he was demon-possessed, although it doesn't necessarily say that. It simply says he was blind and unable to speak and demon-possessed, but it doesn't say whether the possession is what caused that. So he healed him so that the man could both speak and see. And all the crowds were astounded and said, "Perhaps this is the son of David." And again, son of David is a title, right? And it's a title of the Messiah to come. When the Pharisees heard this, they said, "The man drives out demons only by Beelzebul, the ruler of the demons." And so they're saying, look, maybe this guy's the Messiah. And he's like, no, he's in league with Satan, right? He's in league with the ruler of the demons. Knowing their thoughts, he told them, "Every kingdom divided against itself is headed for destruction, and no city or house divided against itself will stand." America could stand to use that one. "If Satan drives out Satan, he is divided against himself. How then will his kingdom stand? And if I drive out demons by Beelzebul, who is it your sons drive them out by? For this reason they will be your judges." So he's basically saying, if Satan turns against Satan, he's divided against himself. How will his kingdom stand? You know, if one person drives out the demons who are doing Satan's work, then they're not going to be able to remain united in purpose, right? "If I drive out demons by the Spirit of God, then the kingdom of God has come to you. How can someone enter a strong man's house and steal his possessions unless he first ties up the strong man? Then he can rob his house." So basically he's saying, it's pretty obvious what he's saying. Except here they're talking about spiritual things, right? And I'm kind of pausing because I'm thinking, who is the strong man in this scenario, right? Because the contrast is you tie up the strong man and steal his possessions. And so I think it's not clear to me, bless you, in this context, except the point is clear. And the point is that if you're going to tie up the strong man, you're not working with him, right? And so you have to be able to bind that if you're going to rob the house. And obviously he's there. Verse 30, anyone who is not with me is against me, and anyone who does not gather with me scatters. Because of this I tell you, people will be forgiven every sin and blasphemy, but the blasphemy against the Spirit will not be forgiven. In other words, if the Spirit's doing things and you're saying it's not the Spirit, you're saying that's Satan, that is because it's the Spirit that does the miraculous things. When Jesus was baptized, the Spirit came upon him. And so if they're basically saying, that's not what's happening here. The works are clearly what was prophesied would happen by God, and yet they're calling it something else. They're trying to deceive people. There's a big question that goes unanswered, and the big question is this: throughout the whole thing, and as we read the four Gospels, the question is, did they know he was who he said he was? Did they believe him, but fight against him because he was who he said he was? In other words, Jesus tells a parable about a landowner who goes to collect what's owed to him on his land, and the workers kill the first person he sent, or drive out the first person he sends, drive out the second, and so on. And then he's like, well, I'm going to send my son, and surely they'll listen to my son and do the right thing. And the people working the land say, he sent his son. If we kill him, we'll get the land. The land will be ours. And so they kill the son. And in that story, they know exactly what they're doing. They know that the son is the rightful owner of the land, or heir, right? The rightful heir of the land. But they're going to kill him because they don't want the threat to what they're doing. They want to be in control of the land themselves. And so this idea runs through, were they intentionally misdirecting the people? I mean, they were, but did they really know what was going on? And I personally think they did. Maybe not all of them, but I think a lot of them did. They could see with their eyes. They knew the scriptures. They knew the prophecies. They knew what was supposed to happen, and he was doing those things. But they tried to misdirect him because they were in charge. They had the power, and they didn't want to share that. And so I think this is speaking to that right here. Whoever speaks a word against the Son of Man, it will be forgiven him. But whoever speaks against the Holy Spirit, it will not be forgiven him, either in this age or in the age to come. And so again, I think this is speaking directly to the fact that they knew what was true, but they were lying. They were trying to throw people off. Verse 33, either make the tree good and its fruit good, or make the tree bad and its fruit bad. For a tree is known by its fruit. Brood of vipers, how can you speak good things when you are evil? For the mouth speaks from the overflow of the heart. A good man produces good things from his storeroom of good, and an evil man produces evil things from his storeroom of evil. I tell you, it's so straightforward, right? Let your yes be yes and your no be no. Be clear on what it is you stand for. Don't do things, don't be double-minded. The whole theme is throughout here, throughout all the chapters we're reading. And I tell you that on the day of judgment, people will have to account for every careless word they speak. For by your words you will be acquitted, and by your words you will be condemned. Yep, sweet, gentle Jesus right there. Bam. Verse 38. Then some of the scribes and Pharisees said to him, Teacher, we want to see a sign from you. Again, he's doing all these healings, so what just happened is a man who was possessed by a demon and couldn't speak and was blind. All of a sudden he healed him and he could see and speak. And they're saying again, we want a sign from you. That was the whole thing that set all this up. But they're saying, we want a sign from you. So he's given them to them, but they're pressing. That's not really the issue. They don't really want the sign. But he answered them, an evil and adulterous generation demands a sign. So he called them straight out. An evil and adulterous generation, that was the point. They were given signs, that was not what it was. So an evil and adulterous generation demands a sign, but no sign will be given to it except the sign of the prophet Jonah. For as Jonah was in the belly of the huge fish 3 days and 3 nights, so the Son of Man will be in the heart of the earth 3 days and 3 nights. The men of Nineveh will stand up at the judgment with this generation and condemn it, because they repented at Jonah's proclamation. And look, something greater than Jonah is here. All right. So this is Jonah and the whale story, right? And if you don't know the story, you're just going to have to, I guess, either go read it for yourself in a Bible or listen to H. Koenig as he's reading through the Old Testament. He'll eventually get to it. It'll be a while because it's much further there, much further in the book. But basically, Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of a fish. I won't go into the whole story. And so a lot of people say, talk about the stories in the Bible as they can't be true and that sort of thing, or it's just, they're just stories, right? But that's not what Jesus is saying right here. So Jesus is actually affirming the story to be true because he said, and it's not so much, because you could say, okay, so first it's the sign of the prophet Jonah, so he calls him a prophet. So a real person who was a prophet, and that's no small thing, okay? Now, if it was the story of Jonah, you could see the belly and he being in the belly of the huge fish 3 days and 3 nights and so on and so forth. But then he says, the men of Nineveh will stand up at the judgment with this generation and condemn it because they repented at Jonah's proclamation. So this is saying Jonah did go speak to them. The story, he spent the time in the fish. Why did he spend the time in the fish? Because he didn't want to go to Nineveh. He didn't want to do the thing. But he did it, and so they repented. And this something greater than Jonah is here. I'm not just a prophet, basically, he's saying. This is bigger, and you won't listen. You're not repenting. Verse 42, the queen of the south will rise up at the judgment with this generation and condemn it. That was the queen of Sheba. The queen of the south will rise up at the judgment with this generation and condemn it, because she came from the ends of the earth to hear the wisdom of Solomon. And look, something greater than Solomon is here. Solomon was supposed to be the wisest man to ever live. Verse 43. When an unclean spirit comes out of a man, it roams through waterless places looking for rest, but doesn't find any. Then it says, I'll go back to my house that I came from, and returning, it finds the house vacant, swept, and put in order. In other words, it leaves, person gets their life back together, and then off it goes and brings with it 7 other spirits more evil than itself, and they enter and settle down there. As a result, that man's last condition is worse than the first. That's how it will also be with this evil generation. Last condition worse than the first. It's an interesting thought about the demons leaving and coming back and bringing, making it even worse when after being cleaned up. Verse 46. He was still speaking to the crowds when suddenly his mother and brothers were standing outside wanting to speak to him. Someone told him, "Look, your mother and your brothers are standing outside wanting to speak to you." But he replied to the one who told him, "Who is my mother, and who are my brothers?" And stretching out his hand toward his disciples, he said, "Here are my mother and my brothers. For whoever does the will of my Father in heaven, that person is my brother and sister and mother." It's interesting because here he's saying that the people who, because, you know, in earthly terms, your mother and your siblings have a special relationship to you. But what Jesus is saying is all people who do the will of my Father in heaven, we're all family. That's basically what he's saying there. That there's no special distinction for my blood mother and my blood brothers. But instead, all people here, you are my blood brothers and you are my blood. Actually, what does he say? My brother and my sister and mother. So he makes no distinction among the three. And so any of us who do the will of his Father in heaven serve a similar relationship to brother and sister and mother. All right, that's it today. H. Koenig is going to do his reading. My mic picks up everything. I got a new mic because I thought it might not pick up everything, but it does. It picks up everything. So I think with that, I'm going to go ahead and get off. I'm going to let him do his thing, and I will be on tomorrow. I did not intend to work late today. I ended up working late anyway. I do not intend to work late tomorrow. I will not work late tomorrow. Unless I get phone calls and I have to take them because they're good and I just can't afford to miss it. But anyway, but I will be on tomorrow evening. So until then,